Good afternoon. Thanks for coming to this session. The session's called Enterprise Solutions with Blockchain, Use Cases from Nestlé, Sony Music, and Workday. My name's John Fritz. I run the blockchain team at AWS, and I'm joined here with Tomoyuki Shirakawa, a solutions architect from Sony Music of Japan, Bjorn Hamel, the chief security architect at Workday, and Armin Nezat, the digital technology manager at Nestlé Australia. So thanks again for coming out. So real quick, before we get started, a quick agenda of this presentation. I'll kick it off, talk a little bit, just a 5-minute overview on blockchain, the services that we have, and a couple of use cases, but I'll quickly hand it over to Workday for them to discuss a little bit about how they've invented a new way to do digital credentialing management utilizing blockchain technology. From there, we'll hand it over to Sony Music of Japan. They'll talk a little bit about how to simplify the really complex music contract flow utilizing blockchain networks. And then finally, we'll end with Nestlé, who will talk a little bit about how to increase product transparency for consumers in the coffee business. And then we'll have a quick conclusion. So, blockchain. What is blockchain? How do we think about it? Well, blockchain enables decentralized trust. And the way at AWS, the way we think about this, is it enables organizations to transact and share data more transparently, securely, and efficiently. And it takes kind of business networks that might require a centralized authority or the ability to not really coordinate across different entities into kind of a single pane of glass, a same sheet of music for everybody to have one view that's kind of a trusted view of what's going on and the history of it. And we see customers adopting this technology in several themes that have been kind of emerging. One is that you've got unique organizations that want to transact, and maybe today there's really no method for them to do so, or they might need to, say, use a central authority, which can be slow, expensive. You still need to do a lot of auditing to make sure things go the way that you'd want to go, when it would be much more efficient to instead have a point-to-point transaction and the ability to do that more efficiently directly across parties that want to interact. Another scenario where blockchain comes up as a way to make things more efficient, transparent, is you've got a bunch of organizations that are trying to work together. It could be something like a supply chain or another segment where information needs to be shared. But each organization has its own IT stack, its own set of databases. There's kind of slow, costly reconciliation processes, and it's really difficult to have any one entity know what happened and all the things that have happened in the past in an independently verifiable way. Once again, blockchain is emerging as a way to build these systems and make them more easy and transparent. And then a final interesting thing that comes up is scenarios where maybe companies want to collaborate, but there really isn't any method to do it. That one company might say, I'll run the IT infrastructure, give all of you access, but another company might say, why are we handing the reins over to you? In those cases, sometimes those groups will create a joint venture that'll manage all of that and then proceed from there, or oftentimes these projects won't even happen. Blockchain is emerging as a way to, once again, bridge those organizations together and make it a way where you can transact and share data to build these infrastructures versus siloed scenarios or kind of architectures that can't happen. So we're seeing blockchain as an emerging technology being able to solve some of these problems, but this stuff is hard to use. Customers came and told us, how do we get started with these open source frameworks? How do we manage them? How do we scale them? How do we get started? And so last year, actually at reInvent, we launched a preview for this service. We went GA earlier this year. Amazon Managed Blockchain, a service in AWS that makes it easy to create and manage blockchain networks using open source frameworks, Hyperledger Fabric, and Ethereum, which is coming soon. Now, there's a bunch of interesting features about this. It's fully managed. You can get up and running in 20 minutes. You pay for what you use. There's enterprise-grade security that you'd expect. I mean, a lot of these open source frameworks out of the box don't come with easy ways to run them with the highest level of security and performance in mind. And these are all things that we take care of in a few clicks. You can get started and start running your applications and make it easy to invite, remember, other members to come and join you. That blockchain is really all about making networks with organizations. And so being able to invite and manage and having the consortium vote on what to do is super important. And those are all features that are enabled in the service. So we're seeing blockchain emerging in many different industries, and we'll dive deep into a couple of them throughout this presentation. But I kind of like this slide because odds are for all of you in this room, you're probably fall into some of these buckets. And the kind of innovators in these spaces are thinking about, we've got the status quo and how this technology and architecture of work today, what are ways that if we could embrace decentralization, how can we maybe make things more efficient, better for customers, safer for customers, more transparent, lower cost? And some of these things we're finding are kind of just really taking a step back and thinking you've got to reinvent the stack. But that's what we're seeing innovators in the space doing, and finding kind of new ways to approach some of these, especially old industries that don't necessarily have the digitized history of everything and do a lot of manual reconciliation. So I'll hand it over to our first presenter, Workday, to talk a little bit more about how they've reinvented credential management utilizing blockchain technology.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bjorn Hamill, and I'm the Chief Security Architect at Workday. And we're going to talk a little bit about Workday credentials and how we're leveraging Amazon Managed Blockchain to power our solution. My lawyers made me put this up here, but since the product hasn't officially been released yet, just have to give you a fair warning, there may be some forward-looking statements in here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Workday, we're a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications, and we deliver financial management, human capital management, strategy, planning, and analytics for some of the world's largest organizations. In fact, we have 40% of the Fortune 500 running our software and almost 40 million workers under management. And I've spent the last 7 years there working on our security architecture, and for the last 2 years, I got the privilege of working on a brand new product around blockchain technology. Workday today operates predominantly in our own hosted data centers, but more and more we're moving workloads to AWS. And this brand new product is delivered entirely on AWS Web Services. So 2 months ago at our US user conference, we announced Workday Credentials. This is a brand new blockchain-backed credentialing product that allows our customers to engage with and use blockchain technology. And it's going to enable us to build one of the most advanced credentialing networks that will really ever exist. And it's composed of 2 major components. On the one hand, we have Workday Credentials for Enterprise. And this allows companies to go into their Workday HCM tenants and define the kinds of credentials that they want to create, whether it's proof of employment or every time someone receives a pay slip, they can define those to be issued as credentials to individuals. They can also go into the platform and manually issue the credentials that they'd like to. And we support a rich set of APIs so that you can take your system of record data and turn it into blockchain-backed credentials. And we've targeted open standards from the W3C, like the Decentralized Identity Standard and the Verifiable Credential Standard, with an eye towards future interoperability. And on the individual side, we've created a brand new mobile application experience called Way2 for both iOS and Android that lets individuals manage the keys that anchor their new digital identity and store all of the data that's been given to them as credentials. And this really changes the security model because it's moving the data to the edge of the network and putting it in control of the user to manage their own privacy. So I've said the word credentials a bunch of times now in the last 5 minutes. What do I actually mean when I say credentials? Well, I'm sure all of you have actually interacted with a credential at some point in your lives, whether it's a passport or a driver's license, or even something like a pay stub or a transcript is a credential. They have 3 common qualities. They come from a known issuer, they're given to an individual to hold, and they provide value because they can be shared with a verifier for some proof of skill or knowledge or status. And the concept of digital credentialing is really taking all these various forms of credentials and turning them into a uniform format and anchoring that against some sort of ledger or store so that they can be commonly verified. So before we go into the architecture of how the solution's built and how we're leveraging Amazon Managed Blockchain, I wanted to actually show you the product by way of a use case. So right now in the oil and gas industry, it's a heavily regulated industry where you have to hold a certain number of certifications before you can start day one on an oil rig. And the way that people prove they're certified is they actually take a little slip of paper with them to the rig, and the foreman takes that slip and has to fax it somewhere and make some phone calls, and it's a lengthy process to verify that someone's actually safely ready to start their job. So let's take a look at a world in which we have Workday credentials, and we can automatically onboard this worker. So let me start the video. So we have the issuing application on the left here. So they're going through an online training class, showing that they hold the skills and certifications requisite to get a new training issued to them. And on the right, we're going to see the mobile application experience, way to where they receive that credential once they complete this training. This is just showing a quick representative sample of what it might look like. And when they hit submit, it's actually calling an API in the platform to turn that successful completion into a credential. So now the individual goes to the way to application, it authenticates that it's them, and then they should see a new credential available to claim. They can go ahead and tap into that and see the values that have been given to them and make sure everything looks correct. If all that data looks good to them, when they hit accept, it's actually copying that credential data into the mobile application. At this point, it's encrypted with their key and only lives on the device. The user is in complete control of their data. And as you can see, I have a certification from 2018 as well. I can start to collect an entire set of data that's relevant to my work life or to my other professional skills that I have. So let's actually go use that credential now. So I show up for day one, and the foreman presents me with an iPad where I have a challenge to prove that I'm certified. I'm going to use the way to application to scan that challenge. And what that's doing is it's moving that request into the wallet, and now I, as the individual, have the ability to pick what data I'm going to release. And so I'm choosing to release my certification to this employer. I authenticate that it's me, and then it's going to send that data over to the verifier. It looks against the ledger to make sure that the data hasn't been modified and that it came from a trusted issuer, and I'm immediately able to start work, and they have proof of origin. We'll run through the scenario again. This time I'll share a credential from the previous year, just to show that you could also use whatever business logic you want to decide whether or not you're going to accept a credential or not. So again, I have the challenge on my mobile device. I pick 2018's training instead. I'm going to go ahead and select it and hit accept. I biometrically authenticate that it's actually me. And we can see access denied because it was an old training class. So let's take a look at Workday Credentials now, the platform, to see how we set all of this up. So within the platform, we have API security that lets you define your client to be able to make these API calls using OAuth 2 standards-based security. And then we have the ability to define personas for both the issuer and the verifier. And so I can define a logo for my organization, as well as a name and how I want to be represented within the platform. So we can see the oil rig there. And then each one of these roles has an additional setup step to perform. So on the issuing side, we have the ability to set up a credential template. This is basically the form that you're going to stamp out credentials with. And so you can pick the schema or the shape of data you're going to issue, and then you can see some summary statistics for the number of credentials that you've issued, and then all of the different attributes within that schema. On the verifier side, we have the concept of something called a proof request. And a proof request is really the abstraction for how we challenge the user for their certified blockchain-backed data. And so that's made up of a series of challenges where you can actually say, I want this type of credential from this issuer with these attributes. And you can see all of that represented here, where I can define the issuer I want, the particular schema, and then the required data. So what made this interaction possible? Well, it was really the underlying trust that we had through the ledger. So in our protocol, when that person shared their data with the foreman, the data was shared directly between parties. No data was written to the ledger. But when the foreman received that, the platform looked back to the blockchain to look up the public key that's the corresponding to the private key that signed that credential data. So we're effectively using the ledger as a source of common trust, almost like a notary for keys that stamps authenticity when data is created and is there to answer the question whenever it's consumed, is this valid and where did it come from? And this new model, sometimes called self-sovereign identity, I like to call it user-controlled architecture, completely turns the concept of data management on its head. In a traditional model, you would store all of that customer data in a giant data store in the cloud somewhere. And in this one, we're actually pushing all of that PII out to each individual wallet under lock and key of a different key in each case, giving the individuals control of their information. At the middle layer, we're creating a set of protocols so that you can receive and share that information. And at the core now is this trust layer. And in this case, this is where we're using the ledger to have a common ground truth about which keys are what over time, as well as the shape of data and whether or not it's been revoked. And in terms of our particular ledger technology choices, we decided on using Hyperledger Fabric for this project. And that was for a number of reasons. Predominantly, using a permissioned ledger architecture gave us much greater throughput in terms of transactions that we wanted to process. If we had high volume onboarding where lots of users needed to join and establish keys at once, we wanted to have a much greater degree of throughput, which something like Fabric provided versus a public blockchain. And the other goal of our solution was really to work with a known set of partners. We didn't want to have to sort through details like what about a 51% attack, or what if some entity shows up that we don't have a legal or business relationship with. And so in this case, all of the nodes of our network are run by known entities. And that's exactly mirrored to what Hyperledger Fabric lets you model really easily out of the box. So then why Amazon managed blockchain, right? Why not download the open source project and stand up the Build Your First Network project ourselves? There's a number of great reasons for that. And really the core one is it lets us leverage our strengths. Workday is an application development. Our sweet spot is developing apps that consumers like to use on mobile devices and on the web. It's on building data management frameworks. It's not on running decentralized networks and picking the right networking settings to make it the most secure or performant, or patching it and maintaining it and tracking the roadmap of it over time. And so it let us really focus our energy on the things that we were good at. Additionally, this same benefit applied to all of our partners. Because we want to run a consortium network with multiple nodes run by other companies, they would also gain that benefit of scale of using the abstractions that Amazon provides. And it really aligned with our technology platform. Because this is a greenfield application, it was developed using DynamoDB and Lambda and a whole suite of Amazon technologies. So our SRE team had a really easy time integrating it into all of our networking rules and deployment pipelines alongside all of the other AWS technology that we were using. And the final reason that really sealed the deal for us is AWS has been a great teammate. We've been early adopters at Workday of a number of AWS technologies. We were early to use Lambda when it was first announced, and we have a great deal of confidence that they'll deliver on their roadmap and continue to update the service and take our feedback as it evolves. So this gives you a little bit of a more detailed view into what our software architecture actually looks like and where Hyperledger Fabric running on Amazon Managed Blockchain actually lives. At the top of this system is the client application, again, that native mobile application that lets users manage their private keys and the credential data. At the heart of it is the AWS-based Workday credential solution that lets issuers declaratively define the kind of credentials that they want to issue and then make RESTful API calls to actually create those credentials. And then similarly, lets verifiers define the types of credentials that are going to power their applications. And finally, underpinning all of this, again, playing an incredibly important role, is the ledger, providing this decentralized trust so that the issuer, the individual, and the verifier can all interact without having direct relationships with each other. What's also interesting to note is that we built this application outside of any one Workday tenant. And so what this means is that a third party could also integrate with the platform to be able to create credentials. And a third party could register with the Workday Credentials platform to be able to trust these interoperable credentials. And again, because Hyperledger Fabric sits as a neutral third party, as this intermediator beneath the entire layer, it's able to provide that verification service so that people can trust the key material that they need to look up. And when I talked about a credentialing consortium, for those of you who might not be super familiar with how Hyperledger Fabric actually works, when you try to write data to the network, you need to have every transaction endorsed by a number of peers. And to get a better security model in Hyperledger Fabric, you want a heterogeneous set of peers. You don't just want one key managed by one organization. You want multiple keys spread across multiple accounts. And so to achieve this, you need at least 2, if not 3 or 4 or 10 partners to all run organizations and endorsing nodes within those to be able to handle those requests. And again, this is where we saw a lot of leverage by going with Amazon Managed Blockchain, is that each one of these, with a little bit of scripting, could have almost a turnkey solution where they could just enable their node, deploy our smart contract code for managing the key material on Ledger, and be off and running with a very low overhead cost and not needing to track upgrades or a number of other concerns if we had gone with the open source solution as an alternative. So what are some of the next steps for this project? As I mentioned, it's not actually released as a product yet, but our current plan is a limited availability release in 2020. We're working with early adopters now, modeling their use cases. I know I showed the oil and gas case, but we've got interest in pharmaceuticals, in the financial industry, in insurance, and a host of other ones. And in fact, if you're interested, please come find me after. I'd love to talk to you more about your own use cases. And our development team is also working to more deeply integrate credentialing into the Workday product suite. So again, imagine being able to automatically issue proof of employment or proof of salary, or even things like in a recruiting context where you go to apply for a job and you can have a one-click application experience because your entire CV is already represented as verified credentials. And from a next steps for Amazon Managed Blockchain, there's a bunch of things we're excited to move forwards with. We're working on a plan to uptake the improved monitoring and visibility that's recently been released as a set of new CloudWatch metrics. We're going to be building dashboards and alerting around that so we can have better visibility as to what's going on in the network layer. We don't actually have other consortium members live in production yet. We've modeled this in our non-prod environment, but we're really excited to get a few more accounts turned on and see this work in practice. We're also looking to scale up the transactions and utilization of our system. As you saw, it's only keys that are stored on the ledger, not actual customer data, but those keys still have a certain cost for each write. And at both of our user conferences, we ran simulations or scenarios where we invited everyone who attended the conference to receive a credential. And so we got confidence that our solution runs at the tens of thousands of user scale. But some of Workday's customers are in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of user scale. And so we're really excited to sort of push on this, see where the wheels fall off, and then work with AWS to achieve those performance goals that we're looking to hit. And the final point I'll leave you with is that we're really pioneers in this space and partners together. Hyperledger Fabric's an incredibly new technology, right? The 1.0 was only released in 2017, and the second point release is just on the horizon. So there's going to be a lot of evolution in this space, and we're really excited to explore that with AWS and see what it holds and what we can take advantage of to further power the Workday Credentials platform. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to invite Tomoyuka Shirakawa up next to talk about his project. Thank you.
Excuse me, just a moment. Sorry. Hello, thank you for inviting me as a speaker of your session. I'm Tomoyuki Shirakawa, as Mr. Bon just introduced me. I'm really excited to be here today, and now very nervous. I work at Sony Music Entertainment Japan as a solution architect and security specialty. Today, let me share a little bit about our experience and challenges with blockchain. As you can see, we have 4 agenda items today, and I would like to have 10 minutes of your time to share my presentation. After introducing our corporate profile briefly, let me share our challenges of music business in Japan market, why we choose Amazon Managed Blockchain Service, and overview of our blockchain architecture. Yes, now on this section, let me explain the corporate structure. Sony Music Entertainment Japan is a 100% subsidiary of Sony Corporation and is a different company from Sony Music Entertainment Inc. Sony ATV Music Publishing LLC, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Sony Music Entertainment Inc. all belong to Sony Corporation of America. And Sony Music Entertainment Japan was founded in March 1968 and currently employ approximately 2,700 people. As of March 31, 2019, its sales was 3.3 billion US dollar. Unfortunately, I can share detailed information about famous artists, number of album sales, specific name of famous record produced. But Sony Music Entertainment Japan is one of the biggest music labels. Now, on this section, let me share our challenge of music business in Japan market that we want to solve. You may not be familiar with the complicated contract workflow in the Japanese music business industry. So let me show you the contract workflow in our industry. First of all, there are composers and consumers here. Consumers are also called fan. Maybe the word of fans is sorry. Maybe the word of fans is easier to understand what it's like. Composers who create new songs want to deliver their creations, such as new songs to their fans in an ideal way. In practice, composers must have a contract with music publisher for copyright management, song management, and royalty distribution. On the other hand, the publisher needs to have contracts with several services for distributing composers to royalties. Services provide the creation such as new songs to consumers. Guess what? All contracts are signed with paper contracts. Can you believe this? That makes it really hard to manage all the paper contracts by hand. And this scheme makes the labor cost very high. In addition, the contract workflow for copyright management and royalty distribution is very, very complex. The reason why it is so complicated is that all publishers and services and central management organizations contract with each other. Of course, all of them use paper contracts as default. In addition, all of them have and use their own management systems, which are not standardized. In summary, this whole process is one, the most terrible and complicated contract flow. Two, paper contracts makes it hard to manage for us and keeps the labor costs high. Three, there are no standardized integrated contract flow management system here. Everybody uses their own proprietary system. is there a better way here? We thought that leveraging a blockchain network will solve our issue that we are now facing. Blockchain network makes the whole process and around contracts among all stakeholders to become simple. We believe there are at least 3 benefits that blockchain technology gives us. 1, simplify the complex contract workflows. 2, reduces management and labor costs. 3, each entity can own an up-to-date, immutable data set of contracts. Now, on to the next section. Let me share why we choose Amazon Managed Blockchain Service. There are 4 main reasons why we choose Amazon Managed Blockchain. 1, support for Hyperledger Fabric. 2, ease of use. 3, low cost. 4, integration with other AWS components. The first reason is that Amazon Managed Blockchain supports Hyperledger Fabric framework. We need a decentralized blockchain framework that is reliable, secure, and immutable of transaction across the Japanese music business, and needed an enterprise-grade framework. And the Hyperledger Fabric framework having management feature for permission and governance and open source standards. The second reason is that Amazon Managed Blockchain Service allowed us to use the Hyperledger Fabric framework really easily as a managed service. You can deploy a blockchain network with only a few clicks. And you can immediately try accessing the blockchain network. And you don't need to care about scaling storage for peers. And Amazon Managed Blockchain runs on its own VPC. That means you can restrict user or parties who can access the use and manage access control easily. Let me explain it from a cost point of view. When comparing Amazon Managed Blockchain and self-management on EC2, Amazon Managed Blockchain is 75% cheaper than running it ourselves on EC2. As you can see, we were able to reduce costs for both implementation and runnings. Additionally, Amazon Managed Blockchain works better together with a wide range of other AWS services with easy and seamless integration. For example, when you want to provision, we can use CloudFormation. And when you want to CI/CD, we can use code series. In this last section, let me share our architecture. This is the current architecture we are building using Amazon Managed Blockchain Service. Please see the left side of this slide. Composers request their rights registration and management to Publisher A. Publisher A writes copyright information to the network on Amazon Managed Blockchain by a web API. On the other hand, another Publisher X writes information to the same network on Amazon Managed Blockchain by another VPC endpoint. Then, rights holder Y also writes information to the same network by another VPC endpoint. each stakeholder can refer to all information from the same network Amazon managed blockchain whenever they need to. Yes, that is all. I want to share to you about our challenges and experience. I would be happy if my presentation could be of any help to your future or current challenging and business. Thank you for giving your time today. Let me hand over to Mr. Amin.
Thank you very much. All right. Just to set the scene, I know this is a blockchain gathering. I'm not here to sell you any Bitcoins, but I am here to sell you fresh coffee beans. We'll just play a video to set the scene.
A single origin comes back to that proud little farmer who wants to do something really special, and you've come away from that commercial industrial environment, and now we've come to chain of origin and people are waking up.
In reality, the landscape of coffee is driven by big companies. Coffee is the second biggest traded commodity after oil.
We buy the most green coffee beans in the world, and we're the biggest roasters of coffee in the world as well.
We've seen a growing trend of consumers wanting variety, new flavours.
Consumers want to know more in terms of where their products are coming from. The challenge for us is we can go one level into the supply chain and talk to our brokers or our buyers. But it's very, very hard to see multiple layers in because it takes a long time for this information to become available. And that's where we're interested in the potential of blockchain. The whole premise is understanding where the product is coming and where the product is going. There's batch numbers, material numbers. That's all stored in closed databases. It's not publicly accessible information. But when we look at Amazon managed blockchain, when the roasting partner buys coffee from that micro plantation, one partner verifies the other partner's transaction. There's a lot of mathematics that goes into the encryption model so people can't cheat it. Today you can't say you've made 200 kilos and tomorrow you go back and change it to be 300. We would know which batch the packaging came from, which batch the coffee came from. You can trace it all the way through.
Whereas in the past, we might source beans from a particular area or region. Now we can go all the way down to a specific farm. We could even pinpoint to an actual section within that farm.
We have a one-on-one relationship with that farmer, with that roasting facility, and because it's publicly accessible, it also means that there's a great level of accountability to everybody in the supply chain.
As soon as I get any order, I'll open up one of those bags and it'll be fresher than anyone else has in stock.
Whether it's how do we ensure freshness, whether it's making sure that the packaging that's being used is better for the planet, it means that the value is going back to the farmers and the partners that we're working with. The dream is that this sets the benchmark of industry best practice in terms of understanding everything within the supply chain all the way through to the consumer.
Being able to tell that story of where their coffee's coming from, we feel a part of that journey. From the fields of a farm all the way to the cup that they're drinking.
And when you try the coffee, you'll notice the difference.
Great. So just to set the context, Nestlé is a FMCG company. Most of you probably don't know what the acronym is, or you might know. It's fast-moving consumer goods. So the key word being consumer, we need to listen to our consumer, but also our size and scale means that we have a real responsibility given what the impact that we have on the environment and on the planet. So for us, we need to ensure long-term, high-quality practices. Now, when we look at the innovation challenge that presents for us, it's coming back and saying, well, what role does technology play for a fast-moving consumer goods company? There's three key categories. One is delivering superior tastes in all the products that we deliver. The other is rewarding best practice in terms of what's being done, what's the industry standard, and also promoting collaboration so we push beyond one category and into another category, and also promoting the industry. So what kind of business opportunity and technical challenge that it presents? Looking at the video, it's quite clear that there's a data latency issue. By the time we get the data, the product might have already been sold because we need to deliver fresh products to consumers. The other thing is when you look at the taste attributes, consumers want to know and have a better connection with the product that they're consuming. When you look at coffee, it might be things like, where is this coffee from, where it was roasted, and there's all this meta information related to it, whether it's the coffee bean type or the altitude that it was farmed. That requires real-time data collaboration from the farmer through to the broker, through to the roasting facility, and ultimately to the customer or the consumer because they want to have that connection. And additionally, we want to showcase industry best practice. It's one thing to do it, but we also need to create value within the industry and promote the farming practices and promote packaging, better materials. So there's a challenge between industry needs and consumer needs. When we look at it, and when we started working on the project, we always asked ourselves, if a coffee cup could speak, what would it say? And for consumers, there's 3 key points. Does it taste good? Is the product to my taste preferences? It would be amazing if it's personalized to my taste preferences. Is the product accessible? Coffee is a seasonal product. Supply and demand challenges are always going to be challenging. And what impact does my consumption have on the environment, whether it's the farming practice or the packaging of the materials? So when you look at the traditional way that FMCG companies would operate, we operate predominantly in the blue area, and this is where the ERP systems come in, and we get real good information in terms of forecasting, planning, what's coming in, what's going out. The problem is when you go to the end of the nodes and multiple layers into the supply chain, that's where information becomes harder and harder to access and to get, and by the time you get it, it may not be relevant. So for us, what we looked at is to do this properly, we couldn't use a cookie bolt approach and just apply it to one of our existing brands or one of our existing production facilities. We went from the ground up, and part of the first step for a company that is a house of brands, let's create a new brand for this journey and let's do everything like a startup methodology from the ground up. So we created Chain of Origin, and its unique value proposition is delivering unique flavor profiles and a distinct user journey. That calls to 4 attributes. The 4 attributes being personalization for the consumer, understanding what the consumer needs and delivering to that. That requires us to collaborate real time, all the way through the supply chain. If we know what the consumer wants, we need to source it and deliver it. The freshness is always going to be top of mind, and also the subscription, because we can come back and communicate and have better relevance with the consumer and optimize the user experience. How we worked with Amazon to solve this challenge was, it was obvious that it was a real-time data collaboration requirement, but ultimately we need to deliver the artisanship of coffee with the consumer and tell that story. So today, what will happen is, we talk to the farmer can upload onto the Amazon Hyperledger what they're processing and what they're producing. That will go through to the grading facility. The grading facility verifies the certificates that they have, whether it's organic certificates or any industry certificates that they have, and they recognize that that's the goods that they received. So that's that verification process. Additionally, we have other things in place where there's an exhausting process, so as goods go away, it's depleted, and that ability to be able to query the ledger all the way through from the consumer, from the beginning of the supply chain through to the end of the supply chain, is that transparency element that blockchain plays a key part of. So every product that we ship out, you'll notice there's a QR code. So if we go through a live demo, this is the actual site today. If you scan that QR code, it will be the similar QR code that we've got on stand as well. That will tell you that batch of coffee, where it came from, when it was roasted, what packaging material we used for that, and all the certificates associated with that product. The process for onboarding partners is they've got their own portal that they can log in, and as they receive goods, they commit the goods to the next facility, the facility receives the goods, and that's the process of writing smart contracts. So the website's live today, and you can process orders as well. So this is the architecture. Keep in mind, we've done this with the AWS team. They've been phenomenal. It is a new product, but we've been able to turn this around in close to 8 to 9 months. And it is a live website, so it's not a dream. You can actually do it. It's technically possible, and we are writing to the Hyperledger. The way it is structured is there's 2 points of entrances. So you've got the business side where the facilities can log in and process what they're receiving and write smart contracts. Additionally, we're opening up the VPC where they can go in and manage their own keys and do it. Effectively for us, we know the learning curve is quite steep for the partners, and this is a way for us to reduce that learning curve. And also the e-commerce platform, as orders come in, it is also writing parts of the order through to the blockchain. So the caveat was, I am here to sell you coffee. This is the chain of origin. The website's live. If you are craving it and you're feeling a little bit down now, they do have the stand in ARIA, and we are serving fresh coffee from Kenya. But yeah, go on the blockchain journey. It's amazing. Thank you.
Okay. So, 3 awesome use cases by 3 companies who are really pushing the limits on thinking about how can you leverage decentralization to reinvent processes, in some cases even processes that have people shuffling paper around, how to digitize things, make them more efficient, to build systems with more transparency for customers and more efficiencies and lower costs. And so these are 3 great examples. I encourage you to learn more about each of these systems. And I want to close by saying, you saw several examples on really how you can use this stuff, how blockchain can be leveraged, some themes that might be very applicable to the types of problems that you and your industries are taking on. So the question is, how are you going to leverage this stuff? There's a lot of ideas, and really just thinking deeply about where are places where multiple organizations want to transact and share data, and how to really leverage these technologies to make it a better experience. And AWS, we've got a variety of tools to really harness these technologies and know-how to help build the next generation of platforms in these areas. So I'll leave you with a couple things. There's a bunch of other activities going on regarding blockchain. We've got a blockchain beer pub and cafe in the ARIA. You can, if you have a bunch of questions or want to learn a little bit more about the types of services we have or use cases we see, definitely go check it out. We've also got some great coffee courtesy of Nestlé Chain of Origin from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we've got a happy hour that demonstrates a little bit of supply chain from a beer CPG type perspective from 6 p.m. or 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. each day. It's located in the quad. Also, we've got some swag to give out, some sort of trivia contest as well. So definitely swing by. We've also got a variety of other managed blockchain sessions. We've got a couple of deep dive sessions that are a little bit more about the service and a more technical angle on that. We've got a couple of workshops to get your hands dirty with this technology, run through building out some sample networks, and really get to know how this stuff works, and some other chalk talks as well. And so if you're interested in blockchain, interested in how you can leverage this in your business, highly encourage to check these presentations out. So I'll close by saying thanks a ton. Thanks to our presenters. We're going to take actually some questions now. If you want to get in touch with me and you have any questions about what we're doing, there's my email. Feel free to shoot me a note. And if you're interested in more about the service, check out our webpage at the AWS website. So anyway, I'll invite the other presenters to come back up. We've got around 10 minutes left for any questions. Yeah, thanks a lot, though. If you have to go, thanks a lot.